Yvonne Weldon, who is the first Aboriginal Australian candidate for Lord Mayor of City of Sydney. Yay, Tara! It's really exciting for us women, us Indigenous women. Yvonne is a strong community leader who has spent the last 30 years working to improve outcomes for marginalised children, youth justice, and survivors of domestic violence. Her impressive profile includes elected chair of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, deputy chair of the Australia Day Council of New South Wales, and board member of Domestic Violence New South Wales. Yvonne hopes to bring the same audacity, creative energy, and fierce optimism to City of Sydney's Town Hall that her aunt, Mum Shirl, brought to her lifelong fight to make Sydney a more just and honourable city. Yvonne, if you could start by telling us a little bit about your upbringing, your early career, and how you got involved in Metro Elk, and then what made you decide to run for mayor?
I don't know if it was decided or decided for me. Good evening, everyone. As a proud Wiradjuri woman, I need to acknowledge all of you, but particularly I acknowledge the fact that I'm on Gadigal land. I pay my respects to all elders past and present, and to each and every one of you and the many nations' lands that you're on, or the clans that you're on today, this evening. An important part of what we do as people is actually making sure that we do acknowledge and that we are honourable to those that have gone before us. So I certainly pay my respects to both my ancestors and to yours as well. I've grown up, I was born here at King George Hospital and here in Sydney, and been actively involved prior, I think, to my birth, but certainly all my entire life with my family, who were instrumental and pivotal in creating the Aboriginal movement at 10 Embassy and certainly here in Sydney. My active involvement in being, you know, one of those kids that were a part of the movement, the children of the revolution, certainly was one of those. And being a part of the Aboriginal movement my entire life. Although I am from I am a Wiradjuri woman. I've grown up here. I was schooled at Redfern, at Redfern Primary School. Went to Cleveland Street High, which the first year that it became co-ed, and my parents then decided to get me out of Clevo and put me in. They tried to get me into St Scholastica's at Glebe. Couldn't get in, and Mum made a phone call to Auntie Shirley, and she said, leave it with me. And 2 days later, I was having a meeting with the nuns, and I thought, oh, this is the end of my life. And then 2 days after that, I was meeting the principal and was on a pathway to make sure my education was going to commence in the right way and potentially end in the right way too. So my active involvement around politics has been my birthright, really. But the strangest thing is that I swore black and blue as a kid that I'd never get involved with politics after seeing what happens in black politics. It's pretty brutal. So certainly a witness to, I think the diversity of views is probably, you know, to be fair. You know, we are many different nations of people with so many different customs and practices, and the way that we come together is not always about the way that we have for 60,000 years. We've come together often on our own terms, and some of these terms have changed over time with the impact of colonisation and what that means for all of us. And the important part of that is that we've had to adapt to some of these circumstances, and sometimes we haven't adapted in the way that we I think that we have always existed. So it's sad in one sense, but it's also heartwarming in others when you see so many of us getting back to culture and what we know to be right. So for me, I haven't really thought much about politics. In fact, I actually shied away from it my entire life. So, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. And then in terms of the where I'm at now, it's okay, I'm in the deep end, and you know, wouldn't get involved with any of the largest groups, the big political parties, because I wasn't impressed with how, you know, your views and who you are as a person is often sacrificed in such a way for what party views were. And I know some of those parties are very progressive in one instance, but certainly when you've got a larger machinery, that machinery often takes over. And the other part of it, which I don't think is fair in a way, is that you become so public, and I'm a very private person, so it's been a massive learning curve for me. But certainly I'm not afraid to take on a challenge. It's certainly something I've done my entire life. For me, politics should be about policy and about making change and having diverse views around how we can actually achieve some of those policies and what those views look like. But unfortunately, what you do see is it becomes more about a personal nature and not necessarily about the political views that we all have, which can be quite diverse. I was originally approached and had lots of yarns over the last couple of years with different people that were involved with the City of Sydney Council, and having yarns with Karen Phelps, who was responsive to Aboriginal people's views. And through Metro Land Council, of course, and Karen had conversations with me. Was I interested in standing on her ticket? I had thought about it, didn't really commit, and sort of sat for a while thinking about that over time and seeing how Aboriginal people were or were not being engaged in a meaningful way, and hence I then decided to run on Karen's ticket to be a part of her team, to hopefully be able to take, put some real views to council to be able to make real changes. And then Karen, unfortunately, had to withdraw, and which means that the whole team, there wasn't a team anymore. And I had, flagged. I said that, we had some pretty deadly people that were involved in the ticket, and was there possibility to find someone else and try and keep a team together and really make sure that there isn't more of what we've put up with in the last 17 years. I didn't think that was going to be me, but it became me for some strange reason, and here we are. And so I've taken it on with eyes wide open, and certainly understanding the meaning of actually not understanding the meaning of work-life balance, because it seems to be work, and there's no balance to that really at this stage. But for me, I think one of the key parts is why I've done it, why I've got involved, is because it's so important to be able to make the positive changes by involving people's voices. If you don't involve the people in the decision making, then you actually don't have the people with you for that decision making. And I have become involved in this political space at local government for the very reason that it should be local, and it's not necessarily about the big party views or about all the individuals. It's about how we can as a collective. And so here I am. Some of the achievements that one of my proudest moments is the fact that I am the first Aboriginal, or Indigenous person that has been nominated or standing as a Lord Mayor in this whole country. And that's I'm very honoured by that, to be that person. But we've got a long way to go in terms of getting. It's not just about the first, it's about continuing all of these challenges to make sure that our people of colour are included in all aspects of every part of our society. And so, that's certainly a proud moment. A lot of the things that I've done on my voluntary in my voluntary roles are extremely proud. Apart from my children and the deadliest grandson you've ever seen, I have a grandson and he's just the best. So that is one of he is my pride and joy. But certainly one of the greatest things I think in my achievements is that being appointed to the New South Wales Strait Council, when I was originally asked would I consider coming onto the council, because I'd done stuff through Metro with state government, and then I was approached to say, are you interested to be able to make some real change and get some more of my views of being inclusive on through the Strait Council. I was very apprehensive around it. I went and spoke to my elders, went home to country and spoke to my elders and my elders here in Sydney, and asked them, and they're the staunchest that you could possibly come up against. They were the movers and shakers of the 60s and the 70s, and they still are, in their own right. I spoke to them and I said, what do you think? Because I thought, I don't want people to say I'm a sellout, getting involved with something like this, because it takes me back to the 88 March and how, that was nothing about celebration. It was about desecration of our people. For me, they said to me, get in the tent, have a say, don't be outside throwing those rocks, get in there and make change and make sure our views are heard. And so I did. And I think some of the achievements I've done since I've been involved with the Strait Council, some people call it Invasion Day. I mean, for me, it's Survival Day. And, and other people call it Australia Day. Whatever you call it, you have to understand that it's about all of us. And if you want to celebrate, then you need to also reflect about who we are and the challenges that we are faced with, not just then, but we continue to today. One of the major achievements through that is that I've been able to get people to see beyond themselves and see what that stands for them. And I think that I've had some conversations that have not readily been had before. And I've actually had people that would never consider changing the date or wouldn't even consider what the date stands for to start to really reflect upon that. So that's a proud moment for me, that I'm having conversations with people and positioning it in a particular way for them to be honourable in what they're doing, because if they don't honour the first peoples of this country, then how can they actually use the word honour at all? And I'm not sure if I've covered everything, but one of the final things, I suppose, in something that people wouldn't know about me, is that I've had a go at lots of things in my 50 years, which I turned this year. But one of the earliest, sort of when I think about so many of the elders that I've looked up to and watched and walked beside. They never stopped believing, and they believed in me, and I believe in so many others. And it's not just whether I personally know them, but I've got to be able to believe that there is someone else out there that needs my help or needs me to give them voice because they don't have that voice, or they're voiceless in terms of the situation that they're in. But for me, when I was young, my sisters and I, we did sports as all of us did, and then we also did dancing. And so when I was a teenager, we danced. We did it for fun, and so I used to go to the Saturday classes at the Black Theatre site, and it was awful. It was Aboriginal Dance Theatre. It was a few of the mums got together, and we used to go in there every Saturday, and there used to be do's and whatever else, Radio Redfern was there. It was just, it was abandoned pretty much. And so my mum and that used to go in there and would clean up, and we'd make our way up, and we'd do dancing, and it was pretty deadly. And so we did it for fun. And then eventually we did a performance. We were asked to do. I was in the Aboriginal fashion parades that were held by the Aboriginal Medical Service. I ran them for a couple of years, and I'm pretty short, so to be included in it was a pretty big feat. But we got to open up the fashion parade as this dance troupe, and we were called the Dead Heart Girls, and it was a deadly dance. And we after we performed at Midnight Oil, had found out about it. We didn't even know, anyone in the. Yeah, you knew Peter Garrett, but we didn't know that. I didn't know Rob Hurst, and one afternoon he came and watched us rehearse, and the next minute they wanted us to tour around Australia. I was the eldest, which I was 16, and my sister was the youngest, she was 10, and they wanted us to tour Australia for six weeks. Mum and Dad said, no chance, you're missing out on school, so we didn't get to do it. But we performed in their Hordern Pavilion concerts, and we did a couple of video recording with them, and then after that we actually got selected by the South Pacific Festival in Hawaii, and we was the first Australians to ever be invited, and it was the second South Pacific Festival in Hawaii, and I got to tour there and perform the dance and a couple of other dances over there. So that's something you wouldn't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's it from me.
So I'm pretty sure we can't convince you to show us the dance, but
no, I could still do it, but I'm too old for it. Yes, I may not get up after it, so no.
That's good. A great story. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's really, really inspiring. Over to you, Warren.
Our next guest speaker is Councillor Dominic Y. Kanak. And in local. Indeed, Dominic is an Indigenous Councillor. Was first elected in 1999 in Bondi Ward as Waverley Greens Councillor, a paralegal, law student and native title consultant. Dominic has been honorary NTC for Rockdale and District Landscape Heritage Committee, and a past executive committee convener of the Indigenous Working Group for the United Nations Association of Australia, New South Wales branch. He was also a New South Wales Commonwealth Education Coordinator for the UN International Year of the World's Indigenous Peoples in 1993, and interestingly worked as a driver for Oscar winner Kate Blanchett in 1993. With over 20 years experience in local government as a councillor, Dominic is one of the longest serving Indigenous councillors in the country. I'm just going to pass it over to Dominic. Please, can you...
Thanks, Warren. Hello, everyone. Likewise, I pay my respects to elders and country, coming to you from Gadigal Darra country. And also want to pay respects, as it's been mentioned already, to Councillor Arnie Pat Dixon, who's the founder of the New South Wales Local Government Aboriginal Network. And we carry on that network as part of Arnie Pat's legacy in local government. I grew up in Mackay, which is Yubara country. My heritage is TI and South Sea. And what I can remember about my childhood and growing up there, we had this organisation that was called a league. Like back in them days, some of the organisations, for some reason, they had these names, leagues. I know there was the Aboriginal Advancement League in Melbourne, and the one that was started up locally that we were familiar with was called OPAL, OPAL. It stood for One People of Australia League. And I remember one of our jobs was to, as kids, was to sell raffle tickets outside the TAB on a Saturday morning to fundraise for the organisation. And one of the meetings that they put on was a speech or a visit from Senator Neville Bonner not long after he was elected to the federal parliament. We lived in a part of the town that was kind of on the edge. So right across the road from us was the Waterside Workers Hall, the Wharfies Hall. And I can remember they used to have these big union meetings there. And like, we're just kids, so I remember they had these really big meetings, and I think Bob Hawke came to those when he was the president of the Australian Council for Trade Unions. So I don't know if those things, because I was just a kid, I don't know if those things made any impression on me, but they were definitely political degrees of separation, I suppose you could say. When I was in the workforce, I was working in ComEd, used to call it Commonwealth Education, looking after AB study and some of those things for our community, and left that, and I went into a time when I was basically just on the dole. And as Warren said in the introduction, I was trying to make a job for myself as a native title consultant because it was just after the Paul Keating government brought in the Native Title Act in 1993 after the High Court's ruling in Uncle Eddie Kokimabo's native title case that got rid of the legal fiction of terra nullius. So I thought there was a niche for some employment in that. And then next thing you know, along comes the John Howard government. And sometimes people ask me this question, like, what inspired you to enter politics? And I say, John Howard. And I say it's John Howard because his 10-point plan that was going to take out the important parts of the Native Title Act where traditional owners had the right to negotiate over acts of basically continuing invasion on their country were stripped out of that act by the Howard government's 10-point plan. So I said, well, this was my job. You know, I was looking forward to working in this sector. So I said, I'm going to go and run against this man. Like, I didn't really know anything about politics. I found myself living out of a car in the Lane Cove National Caravan Park, which was part of the electorate of Bennelong. So I had I got onto the electoral roll, had an electoral roll address in the electorate of Bennelong, but then I found out, oh, you've got to pay all these nomination fees if you want to run as a candidate in the federal election. Living on the dole, I really didn't have any extra money, so I looked around for help. And because I come from Yuba country in Mackay, Queensland, I knew that there was an Indigenous Peoples Party. So I rang up the Indigenous Peoples Party and I said, look, I'm looking for help. I want to run against John Howard over this 10-point plan thing down here in Bennelong. Yeah, can you help me out? And they said, we can help you out, but what we'd like you to do is to come back up to Queensland, go to Ipswich and run against Pauline Hanson. So I was thinking, oh, look, you know, this is all new to me. I kind of had my mind set on running against John Howard. I'm living down here, I'm on the dole. And they said, well, we probably can't help you then, but keep it in mind. And I thought, I said, no, I probably can't do that. So the next thing I tried was, there was this political party that had grown up in opposition to the Pauline Hanson One Nation Party. It was called Unity Party. So I went to their meetings and I approached them and they said, oh, well, you can help us. So I was helping them on election day. Actually, I met John Howard because he was going around visiting all the polling booths on that day. And a person came over to me and said, oh, I'm running for the Greens. And it happened to be Jamie Parker. Jamie Parker is now the New South Wales member for Balmain. So he spoke to me about the Greens. I got interested in the Greens. And I was impressed with the way they summarise their policy into 4 main pillars, which are basically justice, peace, eco-sustainability and grassroots democracy. And they operate by a consensus decision-making process. So I thought that was close to what we as blackfellows, as First Nations people, keep as our own principles about how we operate in relation to people and country. So it seemed to me like a good match. I went to a meeting to fundraise for the Greens over at the Tempe Bowling Club, which happened to be in a park called the Gough Whitlam Park. And John Kay, who's now a deceased member of the New South Wales Greens Parliament, came up to me and said, oh, would you like to formally join the Greens party and run in the state election for Kogarah? There was a state seat of Kogarah at the time. And so I agreed to do that. I joined formally and I ran in Kogarah. Obviously didn't win, but I was surprised how well the Greens did. I thought, well, it's not me, it's the Greens policies and the Greens party that are getting these votes. And I think it was like, I think it was a Labor seat then. So it was like Labor, Liberal, Green. So it was an interesting experience. First time, like all surreal to me, still is surreal, some of this stuff. So from there I went to Bondi and the Greens in the Bondi area. And I went to Bondi because I said I was involved in native title and the Olympic Games came along and they were going to build this volleyball stadium on Bondi Beach. And I said, well, you know, you really can't do that unless you talk to, you know, like traditional owners and land councils, Crown land, you should do something as the Olympic body. And we ended up running a campaign about that. And through that campaign, I came to stay around Bondi, and the Greens approached me and said, well, would you be interested in being a local council candidate? The incumbent council, he's had a number of years. He wants to do something else. He wants to go, and we're looking for someone. Would you be interested? And they asked at this meeting, and they said, I didn't make up my mind. So I went to a meeting, and they said, well, we're looking for volunteers for candidates. And I thought, well, they already asked me. I looked around, no one put their hand up. So I thought, well, if I go and put my hand up, then it's going to draw the other people out of the crowd, and there'll be like, a group of people, and I can just kind of sink back in the background again. But I was the only one to put my hand up. And so that plan didn't work. And I thought, well, okay, I'm new, people don't know me. I'll just go through the kind of motions of what I've been through in this election thing, be a candidate, talk about policies, all the stuff, and that'll be it. I won't get elected. I've only just knew I got elected. So that plan didn't work. So I've been there now 22 years. And one of the main parts that I'm really glad about is on my first big local government conference, I actually met Auntie Pat. And it's just like, how you have these visions or you have these memories of things. And I was walking through this doorway to go to these trade halls that they have at these conferences, like these big trade exhibitions where people who want to sell stuff to local government line their stalls up. And I was looking down this kind of big corridor of stalls. And it's kind of like she just appeared in the doorway like that. And, those old people, they got that way of, our elders got that way of, seeing you and seeing through you. So like for like this few split seconds, there's no conversation. And then she came over, introduced herself and said, she's Labor. And I said, I'm Green. And she asked me about what I wanted to do and talked about, getting involved with the networks and things like this. So I became a member of the local government network and have been a member of that since that time. And more recently part of the executive of the local government Aboriginal network. And I'm very glad that these politics and colour and candid conversations are happening with candidates. And I'm really impressed. I'm really glad because it's something that local government Aboriginal network has been working on for a long time. We had our last face-to-face conference before COVID in 2019 at the Australia Morning Day Hall. And thanks to Yvonne and the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, they were our sponsor and supporter for that conference, the last one before COVID things hit, and we haven't had a face-to-face since then, but it was a successful conference. And we were very glad at that conference to bring together people from, we had the chair of the New South Wales Land Council, had Ann Dennis there, and we had the CEO, Mr. Arta came, and we had people from the New South Wales Electoral Commission came and spoke to people interested who want to think about being candidates in the process for that. So it was a very good conference for generating that candidates' political energy and interest that we now see coming through these sessions here. I can leave other things till questions, but like one of the things is, I suppose, talking about racism. I remember there was this one particular reconciliation week when we'd had a good week, we'd had good conversations with people. It was on the Friday of the reconciliation weekend. I was standing at the bus stop ready to go home for the weekend after this, what I thought was a really good week of talking to people and, talking about all the issues about sovereignty, treaty, reconciliation, how does it work in local government? And I'm at the bus stop and this black sports car in Bondi, on Bondi Road, flash black sports car goes past, and then this guy, one of the guys saying that, you black, I won't say the rest, everyone knows what the usual expression is. And I think, all times, I was going to run out on the road and chase the car and try and pick up something. I thought, I'm too old now, too fat anyway. I wouldn't have made it. Younger, I might have caught the car, but no. But, like just these highs you get on, and then there's always one in the crowd and one racist in the crowd, and they bring you down. But, get over it. You're going to If there's one thing when you're talking about politics, if you've got a passion for politics, anyone, I reckon, pursue it, explore it. Might not be as a candidate, might be more like on the campaigning side of politics, might end up being an advisor to a politician, but have a go. But I think because of my bias in local government, if there's one thing that where you want to express that political passion as a blackfella, as a First Nations person, consider being a local councillor. It gives you a great insight into the other levels of politics. You get to see behind the scenes, and it's a good way to say, well, is this somewhere where I want to spend more time, and do I want to keep in local council? Do I want to consider state? Do I want to look at federal? Do I want to consider being a senator? Do I want to be a federal member candidate for my local area? Do I want to be that representative for the people who live around me in my neighbourhood? But through all that, having my passion as a First Nations person and bringing those issues onto the floor of the parliament or the council debate and making sure people are aware of our voice. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic, for coming along and sharing those experiences with us. After, being in local government for the last 22 years. So that's really incredible achievement.
Thank you.
Our final speaker for this evening is Councillor Cody Brady, who is a proud descendant of the Gamilaroi and the Waverley tribes of New South Wales and has served as a local government councillor since 2016, I believe. He is the first Aboriginal and first openly gay councillor, Warrumbungle, Shire Council. He has lived in Coonabarabran for the most of his life and sits on multiple committees, including the Sporting Advisory Committee and the National Advisory Committee for Wesley Life Force, and he chairs the local suicide prevention network. He also lobbies to keep Santos and coal seam gas out of the Pilliga. Warrumbungle, LGA and surrounds. A passionate advocate for regional and remote youth and vulnerable communities. Cody also volunteers for National Aboriginal Sports Chants Academy, NASCA, and the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Catholic Council, NATSIC. Cody's other work includes Aboriginal family practitioner, social worker, small business owner, and professional therapeutic carer, foster carer. Cody, what motivated you to run in local government in the Warrumbungle Shire?
Yeah, thanks for that, Warren. First off, I'd also like to acknowledge all Aboriginal people and our ancestors right across Australia and honour the lands that we all meet here on tonight. I've just typed up a bit of a snapshot of my life and what inspired me to run as a councillor. And so, yeah, as introduced, I'm Cody, a Gomeroi Waiwan man. I've grown up in Coonabarabran most of my life, and my family mainly originates from Kanak and other Western New South Wales communities. I'm one of 7 children, and I love growing up in a big family. Lots of friends and family to play with and get into mischief with. My parents were always involved and very active in the community, volunteering and supporting vulnerable people. I have been blessed with a great life and I enjoy sharing my resources, time, home and energy with others. And my motto is always, there's always another seat at the table, hence why our dining table has extras on it most nights. Growing up in a small country town has its benefits, and I was involved in many things, including horses, rugby league, different youth development projects and work. I loved it. While I was still in year 10, I held down 3 jobs, one at the local pizza shop, one at IGA, and a 2 a.m. start on a Saturday morning at the bakery. My work life started, my full-time work life started as an apprentice baker. And then I went on to other things, and I opened up and managed Subway, cooked in cafes, bar work, student support officers, cleaner, HR in local government, worked in banking, cleaning, case management, and recently owned and ran a very successful restaurant and coffee and ice cream van. Currently, I own a self-storage business, and I'm a family practitioner with Orange Aboriginal Lands Council, but based in Coonabarabran. Also, I'm a professional therapeutic carer, which is what I'm really excited about. It's a different model of care for Australia, and it's been in Germany for 25 years, and our organisation is it's very small, but yeah, hopefully it shakes up the system for kids in out-of-home care, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. So alongside all that, I'm elected councillor, and I have been for the last 5 years. That's why I'm here tonight. There are a couple of reasons why I got into politics. I've been involved with many committees, and for example, chairperson of the Coonabarabran Local Aboriginal Lands Council for many years, president of the Show Society, chairperson of Relay for Life, the DV committee, drug and alcohol, board member for the Health Council, and many, many more. I thought I could make it more of a difference in the closest level of government to grassroots people, and if I was a part of the decision making, what that could mean for the people I represent in our communities. I found this experience.
Looks like he...
Hey? Are you there, Kate?
Go on, brother, I can still hear you. I don't know, other things might have froze, I don't know.
Oh, rightio. No, yeah, so I thought I could, oh, sorry, I'm lost the train of thought. I found this experience frustrating, enjoyable, stressful, though very rewarding, as I like getting on with the job, and that's not what is always the case, as things can drag on and lots of red tape in the way. I saw there was no one like me on council, being that it was mainly made up of aged, white, farmer-type males and privileged people of our communities. I passionately wanted to be able to make a positive difference to the vulnerable and the young people of our Shire that don't get much of a look in because of the demographic of council. The time was right for me. I was 35 and I gave it a go, and here I am 5 years into it. I'm the first Aboriginal councillor, first openly gay councillor. Not only that, but the first tattooed and pierced councillor on a very conservative council. I'm independent as they come, as I don't like to toe a party's agenda. I'll work with anyone that is genuinely trying to make a positive difference to the lives that are doing it tough. I have good working relationships with our federal and state members, and also with other members of our council, though I don't always agree with the decisions that are getting made. I was asked of my proudest political win in my career, though it might not seem a massive one, but this is the first one that come to mind, is pushing through and building a yarning circle healing garden in our local park with young people I work with. There's still a lot of resistance against any visible evidence of Aboriginal people in our communities, and this very concrete, well, sandstone piece of Aboriginal culture that has been claimed since colonisation as a white space is very gratifying. Not only challenging some councillors' thoughts at the start, example, a heap of black fellas sitting around in a group where tourists pull up and visit, and it can be built where no one can see it, can't it? This beautiful public space is used daily by travellers, the local schools to hold outdoor classes, TAFE meetings have been held there, groups and families sharing time together, having a fire pit and a barbecue on the weekend. something so simple and so rewarding for the whole community. The part I love and appreciate is all councillors forgo their yearly increase and financially contributed to building this special place, even the ones that had resistance in the first place. So that's, yeah, my little proud moment, I suppose, since being a councillor. Yeah, and thank you for listening to the snapshot of my life, and I look forward to seeing many First Nations people run in the local government election this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. It's really great to hear about the yarning circles and the cultural things that you've been doing in the community. Over to you, Kat.
Thanks. That was really great. It's really awesome to hear the experiences of each of you, what how you've journeyed into politics, and some of your experiences along the way, and your achievements as well. It's really inspiring. So in this next session, we're going to pose a couple of questions to the panel to just openly discuss amongst themselves. In the meantime, if anyone in the audience has a question they'd like to pose to any of the panelists, please put it in the chat, and Danny will read those questions out after this session. So the first question we have for the panel is, and this is something that Dom touched on, we know that racial discrimination is one of the biggest barriers for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people stepping into politics. There's a lot of research around that. We know that as our lived experience as Indigenous people. So what has been your experience as on the panel? What has been your experience, and how have you managed the racism? And you can just jump in at any time.
I haven't really experienced any racism in my infancy in running, but certainly experienced racism, in my life. There has certainly been people that are quite small-minded and actually have their own views, but I think the way, whether I'm doing a welcome or whether I'm involved in different aspects, in my voluntary life or anything in between, about sharing, informing people is often the best way. And sometimes you actually just have people that, will have their views, racist views, and still don't believe that they're racist. I work in youth justice, and, one of the key things one of the first things I asked was, apart from the stats that we have on overrepresentation of Aboriginal young people, and we're the end product of a system that has failed these young people. But yet the over-policing of our young people is the key part, and no one wants to talk about racism around that. I don't know why people avoid the term racism, and the reason why they avoid them, a lot of people actually believe that there isn't any because they don't want to be challenged on the fact that maybe they do have racist views or a bias, and they do not want to be inclusive, or they say, like I've seen people that say, oh, this will always be Aboriginal land, and they'll open their meetings that way, but then they refuse to have Aboriginal views at the table. So, it could be overt or covert, it doesn't matter, it exists, but people get really uncomfortable about addressing its existence at all. So for me, I just take it on.
And what about you, Cody? How have you addressed it?
So when I first got onto council, it was a pretty rough road, and I nearly actually resigned. I would say in the first 6 months, there was comments. So the community elected me, and I was, I polled really, really well. I think there were 17 candidates, and I polled third out of those 17. For 9 seats. And when I got in council, that's where I experienced the racism from the other councillors, like, little sniggly remarks like, I only got in because of the abos, and, different little things, and not racism, but discrimination. Like, I'm on average probably 30 to 40 years younger than most of our councillors, and so being a gay man as well, we'll have the Mardi Gras here next, like, you know, sort of, you know, those really, I'm old enough and got broad enough shoulders to take them on, but that, you know, that really worries me if, you know, vulnerable people want to step up and, you know, and expose themselves to that. So anyway, I've built good relationships with them. I don't forget how they've treated me, but for the better of the community, I've worked, you know, through that. And yeah. So
yeah, it's tough, isn't it? So how, Dominic, you talked a little bit about it in your discussion. Have you experienced anything recently as a councillor?
My examples are probably a little bit weird. As a councillor, like every year or every new term, they take these photos of the newly elected councillors, you know, for some kind of photo to put up in the council foyer or whatever, you know, this is your new council. And they were doing this photo, and I had on my Stop Black Deaths in Custody t-shirt, and one of the councillors said, "Oh, I'm not going in the photo if he's wearing that t-shirt." And I was about to say, well, you know, you'll have to stay out of the photo then, won't you? But then I thought, nah, like Cody just said, you kind of make these, I don't know, agreements or, I don't know, compromises, if that's the word, for, you know, to keep the peace kind of thing. So I said, all right, I'll put on a jacket. But when I said that, I was looking at the photographer and I seen his eyebrows go up, and, like, you know, he's thinking, what is this fella going on about, saying he doesn't want to be in the photo with this lad wearing his Stop Black Deaths in Custody t-shirt. So I put the jacket on, but I think I must have had some support from the photographer, because when he took the photos, he kind of gave me the nod. So I grabbed the jacket and pulled it open, and you could still see the message. So I'm sitting there, and funny enough, because of the way people got placed, the councillor that said he didn't want to sit in the photo, he was sitting next to me, I realised, by the end of the photo. So that didn't work for him. There was this weird one when you're handing out at the time for the polling booth. I wasn't there because you go around to a couple of different booths to see, you know, different people. You do the rounds kind of thing. And so I wasn't at this booth when this happened, but I came back and they all running up to me and they said, "Oh, Dominic, yeah, we're glad you weren't here like 15 minutes ago. There was this guy came through." And I said, "What's the matter? What went on?" And he said he rushed through and he was pushing people out of the way kind of thing, pushing their hand out of the way when they're trying to hand him a piece of paper, and he stand in the middle of the crowd and he reckons, "Where's the one with the abo on it?" And I was thinking, oh, what are they going to tell me? What did he say? He said, well, we said, oh, one of the Liberals come up to him and said, "Oh, he's over there, he's in the Greens." So he run over to the Greens and he said, where's the papers? And he grabbed the paper and then he looked at it and he turned around to him and he said, "This is the one I want." He says, "He's the only one who gets stuff done around here." And then he like stormed into the polling booth, but his approach was, you know, "Where's the abo?" Yeah. So it's weird.
You do. I mean, I've heard this a lot, you know, for every person that attacks you, there's several others that'll stick up for you straight away, you know. We interviewed gay MPs on a Candid Conversation and in April, and it was interesting. Don Harwin, Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, who was he had just come out, and he sort of came out as openly gay, and he started getting some flack online and stuff. And he said he was really, really heartened by the fact that so many people, that what it did was it generated so much positive feedback from the community who were protecting him. People just rallied around him and protected him. And so, yeah, I imagine, I wonder, so that's what you're talking about, you know, your experience. And I hope that that is the experience for you know, all Indigenous people that do step into politics, that we see that happening more and more. And I think also there's strength in numbers, right? The fact that so many of you are now running and stepping up, you know, you have more of a support network amongst each other, and, you know, hopefully that stamps out all of that bad behaviour around racism. Thanks for sharing, guys. That's really important to hear your experiences. Over to you, Warren, for the next question.
The second question for this evening is, politics is a really challenging, and I'd like to know why each of you have chosen to run either as an independent or aligned with a political party. For example, Dominic, why did you choose to join the Greens?
Oh yeah, I think because of the way they summarised their policies in some of that stuff I said before, it seemed simple to me, and all those principles or pillars that they call them seem to align with our values as First Nations people. You know, we are about justice and looking after people, and when they say justice, they in the party policy discussions, it's talking about recognising sovereignty and finding a path to treaty and looking at the issues of ongoing black deaths in custody. So that's all part of justice. And it's also part of the peace process that touches on the reconciliation kind of context as well, I suppose. And eco-sustainability, you know, it's all about how the First Nations principles we have is about looking after people and country. So that fits. And grassroots democracy is about letting each local group make up their own decisions, you know, their own decisions about who their candidates are, where they want to put their preferences, whether or not they want a preference in a ticket. So it's about giving the power to the local group, which I think is also part of what we have as First Nations values. And that consensus decision making is, I think, the way that we try and make our decisions as First Nations people. We want to include all the diversity of views. We don't want people to feel like they haven't been heard, their voice hasn't been heard, or if their voice has been heard, it hasn't been heard in a tokenistic way. So those things appeal to me, and I think First Nations values that I see that we have as people align with those things. So for me, it's a match to what a political party represents.
Great. And what about our independent candidates? What have you find challenging within the stuff that you are doing?
What's the question?
Politics is really challenging, and I'd like to know why each of you have chosen to run either as an independent or align with a political party.
I think you already answered that, Yvonne, in your opening discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't run with a political party for various reasons that I already discussed, but the challenging part is that, I mean, it's interesting. I didn't see it as a challenge. I actually just thought it was something that needed to be done. That inclusive, I mean, and even the people that I have, they're running in my group, it's about making sure that Sydney comes out of what we're currently in. I mean, it's about making the positive change and having Sydney thrive, but also being inclusive. And I don't think what I have seen and what I've watched the council meetings, and they're not terribly inclusive. And I struggle with the fact that there are people, and I get it, that's all about politics and the game playing that goes on with it. But I've seen some voting where the very people that are standing for Lord Mayor now are actually voting against the very people that they say they represent. You know, like those very people that have asked these candidates or these elected councillors to say, these are the problems I've got with bike lanes, or these are the problems that I've got with the fact that there's no green open space, or there's no affordable housing. The very issues that have been raised with these individual councils are the ones that have actually hindered the process of these policies and these priorities being getting up on council's list of action. And so for me, standing was about making sure that those voices are heard. I've done it on my whole life, but it's something I think it needs to get back to what truly is about local council is what it should be standing for, not for local individuals. And I think that's the part about being unified, and that's why you know, we are a united group, independently but united.
Right.
Yeah. We're noticing that more and more people are voting away from the two parties and more and more towards independence. Certainly, I mean, we know that happens a lot out in the regions. There's a lot more independent councillors out in rural and regional areas, but we're actually seeing, you know, a shift occurring in the urban centres as well.
I think the difference, certainly in Sydney, is that, you know, Clover Moore, you know, the Lord Mayor, she's been there for 17 years. She may have been independent, certainly, you know, and that's what they call themselves, but it certainly is more like a machinery of a party than I would say independent. We don't have, you know, there's a Lord Mayor's budget of, you know, 3.9 million per year, and that's being used on campaigning. I don't have that money. I can't even fundraise that money, even if I could, because there's caps to that. So, you know, it's about how these machineries benefit some, and then we say that they're independent because that's a term that's used in terms of a heading, but it's not very, you know, it's not so much the case when we talk about grassroots movement and how we're door knocking and speaking to people. People are coming to us and raising real concerns that what they currently live, and it's their livelihoods. How do you raise your voice for them and be honest about that?
Yeah, I agree. Cody, tell us what it's like out there being an independent.
So majority of our council are independent, but they're, I suppose, they're the white, old man white party sort of thing. So they stick together pretty well. And when I come on being, you know, the young fella, and that they tried to get me, you know, to side with them basically. And I say they try to get me into bed with them to, you know, to get their things across the line. And I basically said, you know, I'll go with you if, you know, if I think it's the best thing for the community and my cohort of community that I represent, I'll go with you, but I won't be just agreeing with you and voting with you just because you say. So that actually sort of shot me in the foot a bit, and they've held grudges on that, even though that we are all independents. But yeah. Really, yeah, there really is some private parties in play sort of on council. So
yeah, and obviously you have a lot more autonomy in terms of designing your policies and authentically representing the community as an independent, without having to sort of compromise you know, some of your operational style to fit in with a political party.
Yeah, being a small business owner and, you know, boss in different workplaces and all that, I find it hard to be, you know, to toe the line with, you know, policies and procedures of, you know, something else if I don't agree with or whatever. So, yeah, so I'm definitely independent and we'll stay that way.
Yeah. So thanks for that. I think what we'll do now is take some questions from the audience. If anyone has any questions out there. Danny, do you want to just unmute everyone for a few minutes?
Yes, so I will. Yeah, so participants are allowed to unmute themselves now. So anyone can unmute themselves and go ahead and ask a question.
Right, so if anyone has a question there, just unmute yourself and pose your question.
Or if you have stage fright like me, you can type it in and I'll say it.
So Tara, can you describe what you mean by voting blocks?
Yeah, really interesting hearing from everyone tonight, and the description of that council sounds a lot like my council. Then, yeah, everyone in there's small business owners. There isn't anyone who is in either retired or running, you know, basically living off their savings or whatever. So it basically seems like they form blocks. So every decision in there has been 8-1. 7-2, 8-1 for a long time. But 5 of those people are retiring, are leaving, are not contesting. So it's going to be the first time for us in this community that it will be like an open election. So the ex-mayor used to get 3 quotas on his own. He used to get like 10,000 votes or whatever. He's not running.
Wow.
I don't know what's going to happen, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Interesting, talking about people, asking you those questions about why you're running. I've done 2 radio interviews, and off air, the comment to me was, "Don't we already have a woman on council?" And I was like, super. We do have a women on council. We have 2, but we can have more than 2. And so far, just door knocking and talking in my community, I've been really blown away with the support from people just saying that I'm not expecting to say, yeah, we really need some diversity in council. It should be more representative of our community, of who we actually are as a community.
And where are you running? You're an Aboriginal woman running in?
Clarence Valley.
Clarence Valley, yes.
So that's Grafton, Yamba. Yeah, so North Coast. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And we never run parties here. So people are always independent. It has done go well here. Coffs Harbour, which is only an hour away, they're running like tickets and doing the whole lot and stuff there, but that doesn't happen in this council area at all.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have a couple questions coming into the chat. The first one is from James, and it's for Yvonne. And it's, how do you plan to advocate in local government for issues such as land rights, affordable housing, which is more of a state issue?
James, I mean, you could ask this question to Cody as well, because he's also involved with the Aboriginal land rights system. But in terms of state-related issues, local government has an important role in ensuring that the voices of people that are impacted by decisions from the state are heard. The fact that, say, for example, in Waterloo, where there's development, and how engaged that the local council is with those people that are impacted by that, and how those voices are being represented, need to be heard. So there was a recent announcement with the Blackwattle Bay development that there's going to be buildings of 45-storey high, how that's going to impact. And out of, I think there's just over 1,000 apartments going to be built, but only 5% out of that are going to be affordable housing. So really it's going to be a Barangaroo West, and so those people that are living in social affordable housing are going to be moved on somewhere else. So to ensure that the voice at local government raises those specific issues on behalf of the people that are impacted at a state level is an important part. If people are restricted, or if there are compliance requirements around development within local government, why do we not ensure that those same issues of compliance or needs are being heard at a state level? So and likewise, when you talk about land rights and the likes, there has been opportunities where local councils should not be standing in the way. You can't talk on one hand that you're working with Aboriginal people and then actually working against them. Community facilities actually need to be run and given to community people as well. So it can't always be about communicating, absorbing all the wealth at the expense of everyone that actually are doing the work. And you can talk about all those wonderful grants that you're giving, but in real terms, how do we truly make that difference when we're not truly listening to the people that we say that we're representing? So certainly being the voice and ensuring that real consultation takes place and real representation takes place. You can't just say it and tick off on it. You actually need to be able to demonstrate that. And when there are state government significant areas that are being developed, the very people that live in those communities need to be represented in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that is a really great question and a really awesome answer. Thank you, James and Yvonne. Because, I mean, those of us that do live in the Sydney metropolitan region, we've just seen, you know, awful changes occurring, particularly over the last 10 years, where marginalised people have just been pushed out to the fringes, and it seems like the city is only affordable for the rich. And that's really frightening. A lot of the, you know, communities are, you know, are really suffering. And, you know, this sort of ghettoising of poorer people out into the western suburbs, I mean, it's not healthy for western suburbs, and it's certainly not healthy for the metropolitan area of Sydney. We've got to be able to blend communities everywhere rather than create ghettos, you know, where you have extreme rich and extreme poor. And I mean, I lived in the UK for 8 years, and you know, some of the wealthiest suburbs in London still had tower blocks. You know, almost every wealthy suburb you go through in London, you'll see a tower block, which is, you know, government housing. And that's really important, because it helps people to realise, the wealthy people to realise that this is right on their doorstep. You know, there are lots of people in the community that are doing it tough. And if we push that out to the regions and choose not to see it, then we'll become less and less compassionate. Yeah, thank you for that. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, so we also have a question from Laura, and this is a question for the group. So what are your thoughts on what organizations can be doing to create more inclusive and empowering workplaces for First Nations people? And this is in regards to recent data that had horrific stats surrounding the prevalence of racism in the workplace.
I mean, I think there is safety in numbers, but I also think there needs to be accountability on what people actually purport to do. There's one thing to tick off on saying that you have a rap, or there's another thing to tick off to say that we've done cultural awareness. If you actually don't have that delivered by people that impacted of that the most, so your colleagues, you don't get that change. One of the very first things that I did, I was the first trainee at Mayoral Council. My daughter's 26, so 25 years ago, and I developed an Aboriginal social plan and we had an Aboriginal Consultative Committee, and that was delivered by the people for the people. And one of the key parts of that engagement was around having people have their say, and also start to really change what was just acceptable in treatment of Aboriginal people. There was really quite embarrassing, I thought, you know, like there was money that was given over to do X, Y, and Z for NAIDOC, and we'll tick off on that and we'll tick off on this. But the way that I approached it back then, and I don't know if it's still in the same way that it was, but certainly, it wasn't about having individuals that were there representing. It was actually everyone there having equal say, but making sure that people could put, that they've lived in there for a long time, or even if they're more recently, how do they get to feel included and connected, and that inclusive part of community is who we are. And if we're not in all parts of our community, how we live and how we breathe, then we're not included. In fact, we're excluded. So for me, the way that we have, what way is important is having more. I don't know if a quota meets it, because again, that just is about ticking off on something. I think it's about people really being accountable for what they say they do. And, the fact that I think Leichhardt or, West, saying, putting those signs up that racism's not welcome here, but yet you see in the media only the other day from the soccer, the racism that took place through media outlets. So we've all got a long way to go, but I think until we actually start to address the term and be honest about what it means and how that impacts, we never really make change at all.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Yvonne. It's really important to unpack some of this, a lot of the tokenistic gestures that we continue to see from organisations, from politicians, and you know, it's more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in politics that will start to do what I guess you're doing, Yvonne and Dominic and Cody, you know, unpacking the tokenistic gestures and, you know, holding people to account to start delivering on authentic change across communities, yeah. Right, so I think I'm going to hand back to you, Warren, for our final question now. Thank you, everyone, for your chat questions in the chat. Warren, final question for the evening.
What final piece of advice would you give to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this webinar who may consider politics as a career?
My advice, yeah, if you're thinking about it, do it. You know, I didn't want to turn anyone off by, you know, saying about the racism and that, but you do have to be prepared for it. But, you know, to make change at grassroots level, local government is, you know, that first step, I think, and just having the seat at the table in local decision making. Yeah, it's really worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so.
I just want to say that, you know, like I hadn't, you know, that I've been thinking about it, but, you know, one of the deciders for me was actually not me, it was my children. I said, what do you think? You know, do you reckon I should have a go at it? And I said, yeah, no worries, Mum. So, you know, I think not taking, I mean, be serious about it without a doubt, but consider all the issues that you're probably going to need to take on. You know, like not thinking, I mean, I thought it for, I asked, you know, my nearest and dearest, and then considered about, you know, consider what sat well for me. I mean, I think, you know, and I certainly, you know, go home to country, or I draw on my ancestors and you know, the spirituality of so many that have gone before me. And I actually have done it because it's not so much a belief in myself, but my belief in them. And that's my truth, you know, like people say, oh, you know, it's got to be about, you know, you must feel so proud. And I actually think, well, I actually owe it to them because they have been the trailblazers for me. And if I actually, if I'm going to do it for them, I'm also going to do it for my grandson. And so it's, as I've been raised, it's never been about self. It's always been about others. And you know, the service to others in our community is really what drives me. You know, and it's not easy by any means. And I think, you know, being involved in so many other aspects of, you know, Black politics in the community, which hasn't been easy by any means. And it is difficult, you know. I must say I do have, you know, behaviours, and actually, if it was on policy or politics, not a problem. But when it's personal, you know, those terms, lateral violence and things like that, I don't subscribe to them. Like, call out the behaviour for what it is. The lateral violence to me just minimises how people truly are behaving, you know. And so I don't. You know, I don't take any of these decisions lightly. I do ask those that are around me because they're going to be impacted on it by it. They're going to be, you know, it has a cascading effect, and also be realistic about how many things you take on, because I don't actually know how to say no, and so realise. And I think about a month into it, I thought, I should actually, because I work full time and I'm on this board and I'm on that board and then I'm doing this stuff and I'm having constant meetings, I sort of thought I should probably start to tally up the amount of hours that are going into my every single day. And it's tiring, but it's also extremely challenging in a way that I'm learning more, you know. And I keep saying to people, oh, you know, I'm on a really deep, steep learning curve. It's just that it hasn't curved yet. It's just continually going up. So, you know, and I love a challenge and I love to learn. So I'm getting all of that in one go. So you.
You might get some handy tips from Cody, because he mentioned recently that did you go on a course or something to learn to say no?
Paid $1,000 for a weekend to learn to say no, and I still can't say it, so it doesn't matter how much money you pay.
Yeah, maybe don't recommend that course to anyone yet. And Dominic, some final words from you. What would you say to people who are considering local government as a career?
Look, the legacy of Aunty Pat Dixon is the local government Aboriginal network. So I'd say if you know anyone in the network, have a yarn to them. There's lots of people around who are Black councillors, more than what I realised when we started doing these sessions, that more and more people coming forward, and we're finding out about more Black councillors. So talk to the local Aboriginal network, talk to a Black councillor, talk to someone who works in identified positions in local government to see, like, what's the lay of the politics and the lay of the landscape that you're going to enter into. But like we've all said tonight, like brace yourself for those horrible moments of racism that you might experience. We all wish they were not going to be part of your experience, but reality says, like, there might be one person who expresses something to you and it's not personal. And as Yvonne said, it's not about policy and it's not about the way we do local government. It's about personal stuff. So brace yourself for that and have a way of dealing with it so it doesn't bring you down, or not that it brings you down, but you know how to step around it, step over it, and keep going on the track that you want to pursue. And if you've got a passion, follow it.